Cardi is the author of The Chance You Won't Return, which receives starred reviews from Kirkus and Publishers Weekly, and was named a Bank Street College Education Best Book of the Year for 2015. She has an MFA from Emerson College, and she currently lives with her family and dog in the Boston area. The Scarlet Letter has a strange place in my heart. It's not a book I actually enjoy reading. In fact, hot take, I think it's kind of bad. But I'm also fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by the dynamic he sets up between the lovers within the community and the questions presented about the gendered implications of choice and responsibility. I was intrigued and excited when Red came across my desk. I'm really excited to hear Annie talk about the book and really looking forward to finding out exactly how she brought the tale to modern day and made its central issues more prescient. In Red, moving to Hawthorne was something Tess and her mom never anticipated, but after Tess's mom loses her job, it's their only option. Tess's grandparents welcome them to their home, but with the condition that Tess and her mom attend church, something mom isn't too pleased about. But Tess enjoys the church community, finding place in the youth group and the church choir. Faith fills a void Tess didn't know that she had. After a very personal decision goes public, Tess faces daily harassment and rejection by her former friends, and singing in the church choir is no longer an option. When she meets some kids in the music room, her only place of solace in school, who won't judge her for what's happened, she learns to find her voice again. Against the backdrop of the Spirit Light Festival, Tess will need to find the strength to speak out if she has any chance of ending a silent cycle of abuse in Hawthorne. And without any further ado, I will give the stage over to Margaret H. Willison and Annie Cardi.
Goodness gracious. Hi everyone, and thank you so much for coming out tonight. I feel so lucky to be able to talk with Annie about this book. I devoured it in about 24 hours, and I was really knocked out by how thoughtful and moving it was, and I'm so excited to be able to ask you questions about this excellent book you've created. So thank you, Annie, and thank you, audience, for making this possible. Should I jump in, or do you want to make some acknowledging remarks?
No, I mean, this is so exciting. Thank you all for being here. I'm so excited to see just wonderful, loved faces in the audience.
You got to speak into the mic so that the people who are in the store who haven't come over here yet know that a great event is going on in the gift side of the shop and can come and appreciate it.
See, Margaret is the professional. All the good tips.
Yeah. This is why Margaret loves running events. Okay, so easy and straightforward question for you to start off, which is just, can you talk a little bit about the genesis of this book?
So I also did not love the Scarlet Letter when I was in high school. I remember being so angry about just the fact that Hester Prynne has to carry this burden with her, and is shamed and ostracized by her society, sent to live in the woods, while Arthur Dimmesdale lives the rest of his normal life and feels really bad about things. But I guess the guilt is the thing that is something he's dealing with. But I thought that was deeply unfair, so kind of carried that with me for a while. And I love retellings. I think those are some of my favorite stories in YA in general. I love being able to take something old, make it new. So kind of been thinking about classic novels and how we can reframe them. I remember thinking one day that for an updated version of the Scarlet Letter, you would need a new A. And for me, when it hit me, I was like, oh, that's abortion. And I was like, that was really the genesis of the book.
Yeah.
And I think from there, looking at the setting of a religious organization, starting to frame Tess's story, and trying to come at it in a way that was supportive of a young teen in this situation, and finding empowerment, and writing a story that I felt like was both supportive of reproductive rights and someone who is in a faith community. So yeah, that was kind of a lot of little pieces coming together.
I really love what you just brought forward about the middle road, like the complex read of faith and abortion that this book presents, because I feel like it is a perspective that's just not visible enough in society. And I guess I would love to hear a little bit more about how you came to settle on like that depiction, like what the balance you settled. I would love to hear about how you decided to strike the balance between those things. And please, and I guess a little about your personal journey with faith, and to the extent you care to share, abortion.
And I think for me, it was something that I did feel very strongly about personally, in both someone who is super supportive of reproductive rights and, you know, very pro-choice, but also, you know, connects with faith and belief and, you know, higher power, and, you know, growing up Catholic and having that connection. So I feel like you said, it's so often in, you know, fiction or movies or TV, we see a divide between, you know, one side as supportive of reproductive rights and the other side as being faithful. And, you know, when in reality, there's a large middle area for people who believe in God, believe in a higher power, and want to provide safe and supportive reproductive care for anyone who needs it.
Yeah, and I feel like that connects to another thing that I really admired about the book that I wanted to talk with you about, which is you do such an incredible job of balancing between the realistic horror of what a teen girl who is known in her high school to have had an abortion and has been part of an evangelical community, like what she would really experience when that was made public. But it is also such a loving and hopeful book. And I guess I just want to hear how you went about deciding sort of like how to include the harsh reality, but also find this hope that could be so warming, but also so authentic.
I think that is actually weirdly something that I found in the original Scarlet Letter, where, you know, obviously in the beginning, Hector Prynne is completely shunned, like deeply shamed for having a child out of wedlock. But over the course of the book, and many years, the rest of the community comes to see her as, you know, like, oh, she's actually a good person, we shouldn't be hating on her. And there's the reframing of A for adultery into A for Abel. And so I was like, oh, I find that really interesting, in that, especially in this puritanical community, that people's views could shift. So I wanted to make that present in the book, where, you know, this is something that the immediate reaction is, you did something wrong, this is awful, you're not who we thought you were, into people understanding that situations are complex. People, you know, have many layers to them, and maybe going through something difficult, and maybe came to this choice that was right for them because of what they have gone through. And that you can be supportive of someone. And, you know, Tess has friends who are, you know, both, you know, very supportive of her in general, and or even friends who still don't really understand her choice, but still can be supportive of her. So I wanted to have that range in the book.
Yeah. You also are just so clearly committed to having, again, realistic redemptive arcs for various characters in the book, and I would love to know more about how you found an authentic path for each of these characters, or for any of the characters who have a journey that they go through with how they perceive the situation.
I do want to have that range for people, again, who have, you know, are very redemptive, and maybe some who are still kind of learning. And I think a lot of that actually came from both kind of in the drafting phase, working with my writing group, who, you know, provide really wonderful critiques and kind of helped draw out that aspect of some of the characters, and my agent and editor as well, who were like, okay, you know, this person, we're not seeing that kind of end of the arc for them. How does that go? And really getting to think a little deeper about how does this person connect with Tess, like her grandmother, like, you know, Tess and her grandmother have a really nice moment at the end, and I think that was not in the original draft, and was something that I believe I worked with my agent on, and finding like, okay, what is the arc for the grandmother, and how can she be someone who is, you know, very cruel to Tess in many ways, but does end up coming to want to understand her and be supportive of her, because of these difficult things she has experienced in her own past.
So I'm really enjoying hearing a little bit more about how your perception of the Scarlet Letter informed some of the fictional choices you made in here. So I would love to know, like, going into this, knowing you were doing a Scarlet Letter retelling, what was the number one thing you were excited to change? And what were some of the things you were excited to preserve?
I think from the very beginning, I was like, I want Tess to, at the end of the book, like, like name her abuser. I feel like again, like that high school me was so angry
Yeah.
that I was like, I need to have this in there. And certainly it's a a different situation, so I think it's more connected to Tessa's story. That is something I was like, this is going to be what it builds to. And I think for the things I wanted to keep was again having that arc from the A shifting its meaning. And having that be a real symbol throughout the book. So yeah, I think those are the two things where I was like, we definitely need to keep this, and we can kind of use that in shifting the conversation. And yeah, I think focusing on Tess in particular, whereas again, like the Scarlet Letter so focuses on Arthur Dimmesdale as a character and Roger Chillingworth as kind of an antagonist, wanting to focus on Tess and her journey throughout, and spending more time with her as a character.
What are some of the traits and qualities that you felt it was most important for Tess to have as you were writing her voice, as you were writing this character going through this incredibly challenging but also complex story? Like, what did you want to bring through with her?
I think she is someone who I would say has a lot of fortitude. She has been through a lot in her life already when the book starts, and she is someone who, again, much like Hester Prynne, has kind of a quiet strength. I think for me it was important to have her have a lot of empathy and, even in this isolation, still wanting to kind of understand other people and connect and kind of go through or understand what people are going through. And I think in writing also kind of a, not necessarily a naivete, but still being a very young person who
Yes.
thinks of herself as, very, very smart and mature and capable because she has been through a lot, but is also still young in many ways, and that certainly makes her vulnerable.
Right, and it's still young in ways where it's like, once she has become friends with the evangelical youth group, when she finds out they are going to protest at an abortion clinic, she goes with them even though she has personal misgivings about it. And I loved being able to see a journey like that in a character illustrated, to see somebody who comes from maybe having been raised pro-choice but never really thought about it very actively, to being put in an environment where it is very clearly framed in a certain way, and there's this degree of absolute moral clarity about it, and figuring out how to navigate those values, and then how to find her own individual values on the far side of that. And I guess I would love to know anything about how you put together that journey. Sort of like, how did you decide what Tessa's initial orientation to these issues was going to be? How did you conceive of the church community that she was going to be a part of? And how did you tie all of that together?
So interestingly, when in my first, say even few drafts, the book was written in dual timelines. So we had the present timeline, which was basically the plot of the book as it is, and also a past timeline in which Tess first moved to Hawthorne, gets to know the youth group, gets to know Alden. So in the writing, there was, it kind of helps that I was able to really explore like her dynamic with the youth group, and I was able to take part of the past and use it as flashback in the book, and be able to distill it down in that way. But really looking at that development of the relationship with the other kids, who she really likes as friends, and she connects with in terms of just like, these are kids who are not going to, real kind of wild parties, like mini golf and movies, and also being able to connect with them where she wants to have a relationship with God, and she is excited about that. And so again, like when they're doing things like, going to a pro-life protest or writing to their representatives for legislation about that, and she's uncomfortable with it, but also doesn't necessarily want to push back at that point because she, thinks that these are people who are like her, and that is not necessarily something that she thought was important at that point. And then kind of being able to see the like she understands that for her this is a very difficult situation, and kind of throughout being able to understand that like many people are in difficult situations, and you really don't know what someone is going through. And so kind of finding that arc of empathy throughout, in a way that, again, doesn't discount the good things she had found with her youth group in her church, but also kind of broadens them.
As we were preparing for the event backstage, I was asking some of my patented questions, like, is there anything you'd like to be asked about? Is there anything you're tired of talking about? And you brought up something really, really interesting about the publication journey for the book. And specifically saying that when you set out to publish this, at the moment you were doing so, you were really concerned that publishers were not going to want to touch it because of how, frankly, it deals with abortion. And what you found was actually that wasn't necessarily the problem, that what made publishers hesitate was the combination of there is a woman who gets an abortion, but who also has a sincere and meaningful faith journey, where one of the big things that she's doing in this book is reclaiming her relationship with God, reclaiming the relationship with God she got through her church, and saying, actually, these people who judge me, they don't own this connection. They don't control it, and they don't say that this person doesn't love and forgive me. And I guess I just want to talk about all of that a little bit and hear what motivated you to tell that story. And I guess what kept you connected to that story, even when it became clear it was making your book hard to publish.
Yeah, and yeah, that was so surprising to me. I think both my agent and I went into this thinking that the abortion plotline would be the one that primarily publishers would be really hesitant about, especially with the rise in book bans and challenges. Like, we knew that was going to be kind of a difficult journey. But we were very surprised to see that people didn't think that there would be an audience for people who are both like pro-life and supportive of reproductive rights and like religious or have faith in some way.
Yeah.
And I recently, I've been looking at stats and saw that like 80% of teens believe in some kind of higher power. And I was like, that is an overwhelming number. And it's something that you don't necessarily see in a lot of fiction.
Yeah.
And so for me, there was something that was like, oh, it is very important to have a character who like has this as a real like core part of her life, and she kind of leans on this in these very difficult times, even when she doesn't know if she should be leaning on it. So it was something where my agent and I had a lot of conversations about kind of what this meant for our submissions journey, and if there would be not only an editor who could get behind this, but the rest of the publishing team as well, because as you know, and lots of other people in our audience know, this you can have an editor who's really excited about a book and supportive, but then if the marketing team doesn't think there's an audience for it, or the publisher doesn't think this is going to be viable, like that's kind of the end of things. So I was extremely lucky to find Artist, my editor, and like I say lucky, but also like my agent was the one who reached out, so she was like very savvy about this. And I was so fortunate that not only did my editor really respond to the book, but the publisher and the marketing team got really behind it too, which was very exciting, especially coming from a place of either this is not going to get picked up, or if someone picks it up, this is going to be something that they still kind of marginalize because they're thinking this is a very small audience. Like people are again on one side or the other, instead of acknowledging that there's a giant gray middle.
Yeah, that this is one of those issues where it is polarized in a way that makes how it's depicted often so black and white, right? But that is in fact, as we were discussing in the back, it's like metaphysically very unclear. And it is one of those things where sort of like what your early understanding of what it means to have an abortion really is hard to step away from. And in light of that, figuring out how to morally hold either belief is actually a really complicated process, like a really complicated, nuanced one. So I am so glad you found a team who were excited to bring a depiction of that journey to the page. A more lighthearted question. Music plays an incredibly important part in Tessa's journey, where it is the thing that brings her into her faith community from the outset, and then it is also the way she finds herself again when she is being ostracized, and it is the way that she connects with the person she's always been, well, she feels so misunderstood and maligned. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how you chose the music community that she was going to be connected to, and like what drew you to some of the artists that get mentioned throughout the pages.
In terms of the music community, I think that was something that really developed kind of in the early drafting process. I'm a writer who has no idea what the book is going to be when I am writing it. So I knew that kind of okay, I want her to call out her abuser at the end, but the middle, I was like, oh, there's a lot of middle in there. I know you feel that. So kind of in the drafting of this book, the music room friends came up very early, and I was like, okay, there's really something here. And I think also, again, being able to Tess is someone who finds her voice, and having that both kind of literally in music and her starting to learn to play the guitar and do songwriting, and then having that translate to kind of emotionally as well. And as someone who's very much not musical, nobody wants to hear me sing. This is something where I was also Googling how to guitar. It's gonna be interesting. But again, it was such a nice kind of arc for her as a character. And as someone who before coming out here was oh my God, I'm gonna have to be in front of people. Are people going to be watching me talk about something? And Tess, in a similar way, thinking oh, I'm going to be on stage with my guitar alone, versus in years prior she had been in a choir and felt very comfortable singing in that way. So having that as again a part of the book in terms of her being able to just stand alone and kind of hear the sound of her own voice. And for the actual kind of artists included, one of the things I do in any kind of novel I'm working on, but very early on, I usually put together a playlist, because I know a lot of people don't like to listen to music while they're writing, but that is something that I find really inspiring. So I tend to think about the movie soundtrack. So very early on, I'm okay, these are the songs that I'm really vibing with, and I'll just have it on when I'm playing. So a lot of the artists that get called out here, Nico Case, Brandy Carlisle, I think I mentioned Basia a lot.
Which is incredible because nobody knows Basia a lot.
I was we need to have a
She's
shout
one of
out.
my favorite, but very few people are aware of her outside of Canada.
Everyone should listen to
She's
Basia
big in
a lot.
Everybody should listen. She's
So good. So they get a shout out here because it's oh, I'm hearing all these voices in my head as I'm writing, and again, the music is so important to Tess, so I thought it was kind of fun to have those little moments in here as well.
It was very funny because I made a post about this earlier today on my Instagram. Now you can put music with your posts, and I was oh great, I'm going to use one of the songs that Tess sings in the show, and I posted it with that, and then your husband Walt was oh my God, you picked the perfect song. And I was yeah, I picked the song Andy used, so of course it
all comes together.
Middle Cyclone by Nico Case.
Oh,
exactly
right.
right.
Everyone should listen to Nico Case too.
Also true. Everyone should listen to Nico Case. She's amazing. So I have long had an axiom that there is maybe nothing more sinister than when you're reading a story about a school or a youth group or anything like that, and you get to the point where one of the teenagers says, it was really incredible because so-and-so just really treated us all like adults. And I guess I just want to use that as a touch point. There's a character in here who definitely teaches teenagers like adults, and I want to hear about how you developed that character and how you decided that was going to be part of Tess's story.
I think part of that was, again, touching back to the Scarlet Letter, a real kind of abuse of power. So it's we need to have that as a part of this story. And I think for me, it was important to have that depiction of someone who seems very safe. This is not someone who people would, point to as an abuser. His community loves him. He really, develops these relationships with kids in a way that seems very supportive. But because of that, he is very clearly able to target who is vulnerable. And in treating them in a way that they feel like they are adults and peers makes them very vulnerable. And I think that is something that, when I was in high school, hearing about assault, mostly it came from, and safety around that. It was cover your drink at parties, don't accept an open container. when you're walking at night, you have your keys in your hand, things that were very much about like someone maybe you don't know trying to hurt you. And for this, I wanted to have it be someone who she really does know and trust, and for a long time in the book, does not think that he is the problem. And really like her coming to realize that over the course of the book, where it's like not only is he someone who is not going to be supportive of her, and she's going to lose this relationship, but this was not even a relationship to begin with. Like this was abuse.
Yeah, it is incredible how stark the distinction between a teenager and adult becomes, and like how quickly it becomes that way. I remember I started working in the MIT libraries right out of college, and I was maybe 2 years older than the people I was working with, and I was like, well, these are children. These are quirky children. And when you think of someone being that age, and it's like, I remember when I was 16 and like 20-year-olds were trying to date me, and I was like, what were you doing?
Right.
I was a tadpole. Like, what was the plan here, guys?
And like at 16, you do think you're an adult.
You do.
You really, and your brain is not really developed at that point, but you think I am the same as this 24-year-old. And they're treating me with respect like a peer. How great is that?
Yeah.
And it's like, it can be great if the 24-year-old is treating you with respect and, considering you as a full person. But again, like that does open you up to vulnerability when that person is really not looking out for your best interest and is looking at you not as an actual person.
It just underlines how incredibly valuable adults who take teenagers seriously, but also understand them as like developing people.
Yes.
Like how vitally important it is to have people and educators and writers who are doing that kind of work, so that kids get to experience something between being treated like a literal child, right, and being either manipulated or encountering someone whose development has not proceeded appropriately, who is also just like not a safe person to be around, right? Because I think it can be both. Like I definitely remember the adults who treated me like an adult when I was 16, and like some of them were not, I think, malicious. They just hadn't really progressed that much further than 16 themselves. And that's a fun person to be around, but can be a really dangerous person to interact with. That is quite distinct from the character in this book, where you're demonstrating something so much more real and so much more sinister, which is people who have the ability to pick out who they can hurt without consequence.
Yes, and I think in this book, he doesn't even think of himself as a predator. I think he is someone who has completely divorced himself from the fact that like this is a child and this is inappropriate, and would have convinced himself that it's like, oh, but she's very mature. Like this is just like, oh, this is what happens, even though this is a pattern, and this is like a pattern of abuse for him.
Yeah. And a clarifying moment for her does come when she sees him interacting with someone else, and she can't recognize herself as young, but she can see that other woman as young. And I think that is such a, I think that that's a thing that's happened to every adult growing up in a sexually coercive society, with the expectation of being an object. Right? Like if that's what you're brought up with when you're younger, it doesn't even register, and then suddenly you get to a point where you look at a 16-year-old and you say, oh, that's a child. And you think about what you deserved, the protection you deserved at that time that you had no vocabulary to ask for or advocate for. So, I mean, I get to do the thing that I'm not gonna let any of you guys do, where I'm like, less of a question, more of a comment. But just really wanted to reflect back to you. That was just really well done. Great work, Annie.
Thank you.
I'm trying to think. Let me pull up the little cards that I filled out earlier, just in case, and see if there's anything that I wanted to ask more questions about. I really loved the character of Patty and the presence of Patties in the book. I guess Pammy. Yeah. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, you're good.
Tell me.
I was gonna be like, yeah, Patty, she's great.
Because in my mind, because she's a retired singer, I decided she was like Patty Griffin.
Love that.
Yeah. Griffith, I can never remember. There's Nancy Griffin or Griffith, and Patty Griffin or Griffith, and I love both of them, but I can't always keep the names straight. So
I usually go for Patty LuPone. She is
there
the
you go.
lighter side, yeah.
There you go. But Pammy, talk to me about how you came up with that character and how you positioned that in this town.
So yeah, I think that was one of those things where I was like writing through the book and it was like, well, the next chapter is going to be about something. We'll see what that is. Having a space for Tess in the town that was going to be safe for her and supportive, and again connecting with the music room friends, and having a person there who again like has been a singer, had been on the road for a while, not famous but like a working artist, and having the space now for people to kind of grow as artists in their open mic nights. And I think in developing Pammy, I was like, okay, I want her to have, again, like this supportive presence. And I also was very much thinking about other artists that, I heard from, like, seen who were open now as, like older the people about abortions that they had had, and seeing that as part of their journey and the reality of like if you are a working artist, like that might be a choice that you end up having to make. So I think for Pammy kind of filled that role for me in here, and not having like a particular like direct connection with Tess versus like her mom, but providing this space for her that would be safe, and being the place where Tess can kind of have her first group meeting to kind of connect people in her community around doing more like activism work.
I think one of the things that's especially impressive about this book is it is dealing with all of these big issues in a way that I feel like it could make it very easy to sort of read like a political pamphlet, or just that the issues are so large that it can be easy to make them diminish the characters, but that is not what happens in this at all. This is really grounded and realistic, and you feel like you are hearing the story of a real person in a real place dealing with these big issues. And I wanted to know a little bit about how you built that realism. Like, do you have experience with a church youth group? And if you don't, like, where did you do research on what being in one would be like? How did you conceive of the town and the types of businesses and things that would be in it, etc.?
So generally overall for writing, I'm very like character driven in work in writing group. We say that my work is people being people with other people. Like plot is secondary.
That's my favorite genre.
Yeah, right? I love that. And so kind of in creating this, it's certainly not like an autobiographical work at all, but pulling from my own experience in in high school I wasn't in youth group, but I was in the handbell choir in my church. So if you are a nerd, you can join handbell choir too. And like having that be something that certainly was not, not the same experience that Tess had, but having, like an experience where I, would go to church on Thursday nights for practice, and we would play the various masses. We played Christmas Eve Mass, the midnight Mass, which was so beautiful. And having that kind of nice connection in a church setting. And then when I went to college, I went like 10 hours away and didn't know anyone, and it was like, oh, I need to find a club to join, and I need to so I went to the student organization meeting. I was like, here's the literary magazine, I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna do, I'm gonna check out the debate society and all these things, and I saw the Catholic student ministry, and I was like, I know that, I can do that. And it ended up being similar to Tess, something that ended up being deeply supportive for me, and I have some of my core closest friends from college are from that group, and it was a very interesting experience as someone who didn't go to youth group, but really kind of connected with going to Thursday night Mass with kids and going on a retreat. It was something that I found deeply fulfilling, especially at a time where I was new in a place and really filled with anxieties. And I think that was definitely a part of Tess's journey as well. And in terms of the town in general, I think again pulling from general life in terms of growing up in a small town. And the book is set in Central Virginia, so going to school in Charlottesville, that was certainly something that was okay, thinking about kind of the surrounding communities there, and again people who have certainly much more conservative beliefs, but are also deeply empathetic people, and how you can, have two things that coexist at once.
Yeah, the book's commitment to nuance is really, really admirable. And I especially love the window into youth group life because, as somebody who grew up in the godless area of Jamaica Plain, I mean, I went to Episcopalian church, but our Sunday school was taught by two lesbians. And, we didn't traffic in a lot of the stuff that people would consider hallmarks of, say, religion. We were just Unitarians who made a decision. And it can be really difficult to understand what the value of a faith community like this one would be, and how it would function in a teenager's life, and how also, we're losing teenagers to people who don't necessarily have great motives at heart because they are willing to provide that care, that community, but those teens don't necessarily get visibility into books like this one. So again, just very glad this book exists.
Thank you.
And I'm trying to think if I've got any other big questions. I might end up with some sort of fireworks displays subsequent because you guys might have questions that spark more from me. But could I hear any from the audience if people have ones that they'd like to bring up? I can keep going. Yeah, go right ahead. I'll repeat your question into the mic so that folks can hear and the live stream can hear.
Can you tell us how you have evolved as a writer from your first published novel to this one?
How have you evolved as a writer from your first published novel to this one?
That is an excellent question. Because as many of you know, this is my second novel. My first one came out literally 10 years ago. So as many of you may not know, I've also written 3 other books in that time span that didn't ultimately get picked up. So, I mean, part of that was just the journey of kind of writing more and more. And I think in terms of, I say very much as I don't know what's going to happen with the book starts, who knows? But I do think kind of in that span, I have picked up better kind of pacing and kind of pulling in characters in a way that you've already given the gift to yourself as an author, where it's having people be able to function in a way that can do multiple roles and finding ways to kind of condense and streamline. And even then, I wrote dual timelines for the first 3 or 4 drafts of this, and then we're oh, we could condense this and move this along better. But I do feel in that time frame, I have gotten a lot more savvy about kind of the overall arc of the book and kind of what it's going to be at the start. And I think also in that time period, I feel a lot savvier about the writing and publishing industry in general, as so many of us here can as writers, where going into my first book, I had no idea what it was going to be like, and what the expectations were. And I think now it is something where a friend recently asked me do you have expectations for this book? And I was I really don't. It's kind of just in the world, and you never really know what a book is going to do or who it's going to connect with. And I've been super surprised and pleased to see people respond well to this one. Again, especially seeing it as something that I wasn't sure was ever going to really be in the world, considering the content and considering my publishing journey. But I think that has been helpful as well, being able to not go into things with giant expectations and just kind of be able to focus on the craft.
Well, excellent answer. Yeah.
First, I just want to say it seems like the university pays attention today. Researchers announced they think they found Amelia Earhart's play.
Oh wow!
Oh my gosh!
That broke just today.
Oh.
Perfect timing.
Thank you.
But so people always say what are you working on next and that kind of thing, which is a great question. But I have a slight variant on that, which is do you have a dream thing or a project that's always been nagging or in the back of your head, something that you just want to work on sometime?
So first, Amelia Earhart's plane may have been found today, researchers report, which is exciting because Amelia Earhart is a feature of your first novel. So, yay. This is fated, I think is what we're hearing. And then two, rather than asking just what are you working on next, is there sort of like a big dream project that you would like to work on someday?
I love that question. I think that's so fun.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna steal that one, thank you.
Right? I feel like I think I love a retelling. So I have like when I was talking with my agent about like what we were gonna pitch next for an option novel, she was like, "Oh, do you have any ideas?" And I was like, "I have 12 ideas. Like I have 55 ideas." So I think like a lot of those would be kind of in that category. For like, let's say maybe my weird project that is like deep in my heart and I don't think will ever be a book. Would be a book of poetry about a girl and her dog in the zombie apocalypse. So yeah, like probably not a thing, but yeah, right. Like I always think about it a little bit, and I'm like, you know what? I really just want to see a girl and her dog like survive the apocalypse.
Maybe you could work with Nico Case and turn it into a song cycle.
Yes.
You know, I feel like that is a story Nico Case would be amazing at scoring.
Yeah, if Nico Case is listening to the live stream,
Just reach out to us, Nico. We're waiting. Any other? Yeah, go right ahead.
I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or expectations on what it would be like to be an author of a probably to be banned book.
Oh, yeah. What are your thoughts of as being an author of a future banned book?
And that was actually something that when my editor first made the offer, my agent, she had a conversation with her, and my agent came back to me and she was like, "Oh, I had talked to your editor, and we were looking at the plans for this book," and she was like, "Which they just want you to know that this will probably be banned and challenged versus it might be." So I think like going into that with that knowledge, I was like, okay, this is, and again, especially these days where there's a real kind of machine around banning and challenging books without actually even reading the book.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, I think that is fairly likely. I feel like fortunately there are a lot of wonderful resources for like writers and readers kind of in approaching that as an issue, and people are like extremely supportive in the general book community around kind of fighting that. I think it is also really disturbing to see other authors I know who have had their books banned or challenged, and people have really like vehement, like violent responses to that. And being like harassed at their places of work, at their homes. So I think it's something that I'm like very like concerned about, but also knowing that like there are so many people who respond in a very supportive way to that. And again, even like seeing some of the reviews, whether it's like professional reviews or just like people's on Goodreads, which you say you shouldn't read Goodreads, but like also I look at Goodreads.
Right.
And people like finding that nuance and understanding that it's like not just like this is a book that has abortion in it, or this is a book that like demonizes faith in some way, or it is something that I try to bring a lot of nuance to, and it's been really nice to see readers kind of respond to that. So I'm also weirdly more hopeful that people will be able to find that in the text itself.
I hope so too. I'm gonna steal the mic back for a second because I got another question for you. Because we were talking about your future adaptation ideas, I would love to know your favorite retelling of a classic and your least favorite retelling of a classic, or a favorite and a least favorite.
That is a really good question.
We can circle back to it if you want a little time to think.
I recently put together a list for a website about classics that I really love. So just thinking of some of them, I love As I Descended by Robin Tolley, which is a queer Macbeth take set in a boarding school. So I was like, oh, check. I
Nice.
love all of these things.
Yeah.
So that one is great. E.K. Johnson's Exit to Pursuit by Bear, retelling The Winter's Tale.
Yeah, that one is
Phenomenal.
incredible.
Yeah.
Another
so
Canadian
touching.
people don't know
Oh,
enough about.
Love
E.K.
you,
Johnson.
Canada.
You should definitely check her out. E.K. Johnson and Gosh If You Lot.
Yeah, Canada,
Get
if you
on
ever
it.
take me, like, please,
Yeah.
I'm ready. So those are actually two of my YA favorites. And like coming from, a child in the 90s, like Clueless is like keep
Yeah.
retelling, right?
Clueless might be the best Austen adaptation of all time, and like I say that as somebody who's about to run a class on Emma Thompson's 1995 Sense and Sensibility adaptation,
Professional.
which is also
Oh.
amazing.
So good, so good.
But it's such an accomplishment.
Yes. I think in terms of, let's say, retellings that I am real not on board with, again, and in the kind of back to some movie frame, Bridget Jones's Diary as a Pride and Prejudice retelling, I was like, oh, I super do not hit with this. Like, and it was so popular, people love it, like, there are sequels to the movie, like, but I was just like, I went in and I'm like, I'm real not on
Your
board with
arms
this.
are folded.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I love Bridget Jones as a movie, but I don't support it as a Pride and Prejudice
Yes,
retelling.
exactly.
Because I think it gets the relationship between Lizzie and Darcy actually very wrong.
Yes, 100%.
I've run pilgrimages on this. Like, yeah, like
This is the tomorrow night. We're just gonna talk this. Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
what's special about the love story between Lizzie and Darcy is that they change for each other.
Yes.
They both grow and they both change. Has that parallelism,
Yes.
and that is what makes I love you, or I like you just as you are, ultimately kind of a betrayal of
Yeah.
Austen's vision. As great a line as it might be
Yes.
for a movie.
Yes.
So
it
just
should be its own
validating.
thing.
I just wanted to
Thank
validate.
you so much. And as a professional who knows these things. I
Yeah,
feel
somebody who's
super
thought about these things a
validated.
lot. Do we have more questions from the audience? Yes.
I have one, we're touching on your movie reference just now.
Mhm.
As an author, and do you ever like fantasize about or think about, gee, I wanted this book to be a movie, and if so, what changes would you want to make to the book if you had the ability to make that decision, given all the, other advisors and whatnot?
Very good question. I
So
don't.
we're going to fantasy camp, and we are going to say if this was going to be adapted into a movie, are there any changes you would be interested in making about it, and what part of thinking about that process is exciting for you?
So I definitely think of it as a movie. Like if I am writing, I kind of have this like vision in my mind that is like as if I am watching the movie, and kind of like going along with that. And as someone who like I grew up on TV and movies, we watched stuff all the time. Like love TV and movies, and would love this to be one. But weirdly, I feel like I don't have the like screenwriter's adaptation sense. I feel like I would be more inclined to like trust the screenwriter to kind of bring the changes to it that are appropriate for a film adaptation. And especially like there's a lot of the book that is very interior. So I was like, oh, I would love to see like what a screenwriter would do to like bring some of that to like a visual medium, without necessarily needing like the dialogue in the background. But like I don't have that sense myself. And I'm like married to a playwright. We have wonderful friends who are screenwriters, and so yeah, I'm gonna leave that work to them. But I do have like casting is something that I'm like, oh, I would be totally part of that. Like,
Would Tess be played by Natalie Portman? Because I'm just going to say.
so
Is that
no,
I mean, it's a lot like her.
This is we have Natalie Portman at home. This is like a dollar store Natalie Portman. But I think Tess, I would love her to be played by, do you remember Paige from The Americans?
Yeah, she's
Yeah.
a great actress.
Yeah.
Don't know the actress's
No,
name,
but Paige
but
from
the
The
character
Americans.
is great.
Yeah.
Perfect casting.
Thank
Great
you.
job.
Thank you.
Any other roles cast from the film?
Again, like I don't remember these actors' actual name, but Alden would be Logan from Gilmore Girls.
Oh, sure.
Because he has-
Jason Doring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He has like a
The
real.
Smarm. Yeah.
Yeah, and he has like a connection on screen. Like I
Yeah.
do, I love him as an actor.
Yeah.
Um,
He's innately compelling, and also you don't
Yeah.
trust him.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. No, that would be used to really excellent effect here. Great casting work.
Thank you so much. I should, that could be my other side gig.
I would love to open a casting agency with you.
Yes.
Again,
I will pick your people with other people.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
yeah. All the people in addition to Deco Case who are watching this. Make
Yes,
us
right?
a Hollywood casting agents. We'd be great at it. We wouldn't know the actors' names, but we could tell you all the
Exactly. Tell you their entire IMDb listing.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yeah,
Coming back for more.
love that.
Can you tell us about the process of titling the book and also the cover process? Because the cover is beautiful. And
Yeah,
I'd
it is
love
a
to
stunning
hear
cover.
about, like, how that evolved.
So we want to hear about the titling process and how you came to have this stunning cover.
Thank you. So again, as many writers here know, the title you write your book with is oftentimes not the title that is going to be your book. So when my agent and I got the deal, we started working with the editor, and she was saying like, oh, the publishing team is kind of interested in another title. So like, let's think about what those might be. And we came up with, it was something like 75 alternate titles. We was just like, okay, like we went through like, okay, here's 10. Like, whether it was my editor, my agent, and I all kind of brainstorming together. And a bunch were from, songs that were on my playlist, stuff that was, based in like biblical references or Psalms. So we're like pulling a lot of different titles. And you're going through and we're like, okay, here's 10. And we sent them off to, say, the marketing team, and they were like, no, these don't work, we need more. And we're like, okay, here's another 10. And we got to, I think, one that, or two that were like really good options. And they were like, okay, here, you can pick from these two. And so we went for one, we're like, great, this is gonna be what the title is. We're preparing for like the publisher's weekly like announcement deal with that in place. And then the publisher was like, I don't think that's it. And we were like, okay, I guess we're thinking of more. And then my editor came back to me and she's like, you're gonna laugh, but the title that they liked is Red. And I was like, that is the title I wrote originally. And it has been on this book the whole time and I love it. So then again, that almost never happens. But now I have a list of like 75 alternate titles. And in terms of the cover, it's again the wonderful artist kind of put this all together. They had asked the editor had asked me like if I had any ideas about the cover, and again like not being a super like visual art person, I was like I really don't. I think I'd sent some covers of recent books that I really liked that were a little more like sparse and striking. We Are Okay by Nina LaCour, like I love that cover.
Mm-hmm.
I know, so good. So things like that, where it's like, oh, here are things that I like in terms of their style. They're not quite the same vibe as the book, but in terms of like something kind of illustrated, people maybe, I don't know. And I did send them my casting for the movie that will eventually happen.
Yeah. We're limited series. We're not.
Yeah, exactly, right? I love that.
Flexible.
Yeah. And so I was like, here's who I think of as these characters. And they ended up selecting an artist, and they sent that to her, and like she just put this together, and I was like, oh my God, this is awesome.
Yeah.
So very, very pleased with it, but can take no credit for the cover whatsoever.
To what degree were people worried about taking on Taylor Allison Swift with the title Red?
Yeah, I think that was something that like worked out very well, where people were like, "Oh, this ties into our Taylor Swift, our leader for 2023 and 2024,
Times Person of the Year.
Yeah. So Taylor, if you're listening, I'll send you the copy.
Yes. You'll like it, Taylor. We're confident.
And you're on the playlist too.
Ooh, which Taylor Swift song is on the playlist?
I believe All Too Well.
A classic.
Which was also an alternate title.
All Too Well, I'm sorry, the original or the 10-minute version?
The 10-minute version.
10-minute version. All Too Well for Friends. 10-minute version. Taylor's version.
Soon You'll Get Better, which is not the song itself doesn't necessarily connect in terms of content, but like the vibe is,
Yeah, and I would connect it with the mom in the church
right?
community, who you find out has been sort of quietly supportive in a way you don't necessarily expect, and who is coping with breast cancer. So it gets in there. It all comes together. I have a very silly closing question, but I think we might have some more. Yeah.
While we're talking about Taylor Swift, did you in fact coordinate that the two teams in the Super Bowl would be both red teams?
Did you coordinate that the two teams in the Super Bowl would both be red teams? With Taylor, and your marketing group.
I'm so excited for the upcoming Taylor Swift event. I hear that there will be sports there as well. So I'm so glad for people who enjoy sports and want to take part in that. I personally am very excited for Taylor Swift's boyfriend. I hope that he really enjoys himself and has
Yeah, I
fun.
hope he has a really good time out there. Really good time and doesn't get injured.
Yeah, right? Just like, don't hurt your face, baby.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. Agreed. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yeah.
Did you find your faith changing, or did you want to explore it more, or did it take any different turns as you were writing the book?
Did your faith change or take any other turns while you were writing the book? Were there any aspects of it you wanted to explore in here?
Yeah, that is a great question.
That is a great question, thank you.
I think it is something that I did find myself wanting to explore more, and again, like it was something that I certainly had connected with in the past, but kind of in looking at this, I really wanted to dive into what it means to be someone who connects with faith and a higher power, but also has differing beliefs from what some of established religions kind of put at their forefront. So that is something that I really did connect with, and I think in kind of writing the book, I listened to a lot of Kay Bowler's podcast, and she does a wonderful job talking with people about faith and dealing with traumatic events, and having a relationship with religion that isn't just like, oh, if I'm a good person, something good will happen to me, and I'm gonna cash in on my faith. That it is something that is more about kind of having a cornerstone in hard times and a way you understand the world. And so that was something that in the drafting of the book, I really connected with, and I think was something that is a plot line here for Tess.
I have my closing question, which is very silly, and it will put you on the spot. And you are free to throw it back to me if you find yourself stumped. But you have tackled either one of the colors of the American flag or one of the three primary colors if you were going to make a trilogy. And write either white and blue or yellow and blue. One, which of the two would you pick? And two, what stories would you be retelling? And what would your little twist on them be?
Oh, I love that question. So immediate reaction, primary colors.
Okay, great. So we're working with red, yellow, blue.
Yeah,
Love it.
I love Mouse Paint, the picture book for children. So pick that up in your local bookstore.
Yeah, or special order it if it's not in stock.
Yeah, right. But yeah, I love the idea of doing a retelling around that, and especially if they're all retellings that have to deal with art in some way.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So okay, what are we doing with yellow?
Oh, let's think.
We have the yellow wallpaper.
Oh, there's a new book out by, is it Anne Urso?
I think so.
It's a middle grade adaptation of
Yeah.
Yellow Wallpaper.
Well, I mean,
Oh.
okay, middle grade.
Oh yeah,
stuff,
so we
you
got
can
YA.
say
I love it.
right?
Okay, that's next.
Because that generation,
Oh,
the Anne Urso generation, has to have something to direct.
Oh, mental health, I love that. Amen.
Yeah, okay, great. So we've got yellow, and now we just have to think about blue. I've been told it's the warmest color.
Yeah.
It's famous, it's associated with Picasso.
Yeah. Also, sketchy dude.
Yeah. The Walter Mosley book, Devil with a Blue Dress, really underrated, more classic. But none of these are really jumping to the fore. Maybe The Blue Angel, which is an old Hollywood movie, but I feel like again we're working with temptress imagery.
And there's was it the book by Francine Prose?
I suspect there probably is, but I don't know of it.
I didn't love it.
We'll see then. Again.
But also dealing with power dynamic.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we can twist that one too.
Okay, so we're for sure on the yellow wallpaper.
Yes.
So that's the
Yeah,
next one.
we're
And
taking
we've got some
suggestions
ideas for blue,
about blue.
but if anybody has some
Yeah.
better ideas, you can come.
Especially
from
from classic literature. Just let me know, and we'll include you in our future movie adaptation work.
Read you Clue from Mrs. Peacock's point of view.
I love, I
Oh.
mean, and you could get some sick Mattel for
Right.
that one. The suggestion was redo blue from Mrs. Peacock's point of view.
Read you Clue, yeah.
Genius. Instead of clue, it's blue. Love it.
that.
Thank you, Annie, so much for having me here.
Thank you,
Thank you guys so much for coming. And